Welcome to this live lesson today on negative numbers. We'll be looking at both how do you add, subtract and multiply and divide negative numbers. This is a topic that all year groups from year 7 to 11 always find difficult, and often it is a reason that they find things that are considered hard or difficult. Usually it's not necessarily the topic they're doing they find hard, or are making mistakes with. It's the fact that the negative numbers is the issue. So we'll look at today some techniques to help us get better and more confident at negative numbers. We'll start by looking at adding and subtracting. The first thing that I would say, and this remember me box here again, anytime you see this, really good to put on a revision card. Usually it's the things that I feel is the most important takeaway from the topic that we're looking at. And I've written here that you always need to visualize a number line. When you're adding and subtracting negative numbers, if you can do it in your head, that's fine. But if you're finding it a little bit difficult or you're making mistakes, think of a number line. Just visualize one, or you could even draw one off to the side. I recommend drawing them or visualizing, whichever you find easier. But you want to visualize a number line. Now, I've drawn one here for you that goes horizontally. You could visualize a number line that goes vertically, like temperature. Okay. But either way, if you can visualize a number line, that is going to be the first step to making negative numbers easier. And I've written here, obviously, if we take away, we're going to be going left, okay? We're going to be going down the number line into the negatives. And if we add something, we're going to be going right. And these two questions here are really important. Okay, so I've written two questions that are going to make negative numbers a lot easier for you. Where am I starting and where am I going? And that will make things a lot easier, especially when you're visualizing that number line. So example 1, we'll start with some basic ones, and you're probably going to be fine with these, but we'll just go through them and illustrate how we can use a number line. If we're at -3, so where am I starting? -3. So we're starting here, and I add 5. Which way do I go? Well, I'm adding 5, so I go to the right. So I add 5, and that would take me, if I go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that'll take me to 2. Okay, and you don't have to draw a number line and do the jumps, but just visualizing which way you're going and where you're starting is the most important part of this. So example 2, -4, -2. So what does that mean? It means that I'm starting at -4, because that's the first number that I've seen, and I'm taking away 2. So if I go down 2, I'm going to get to -6. Example 3, 5 plus -3. Now this is where things get a bit tricky for students. They always get a little bit confused as, what does that mean? Well, you need to remember that a mixture makes a minus. So if you've got two signs next to each other, that means it's a minus. So you need to remember that a mixture makes a minus. Okay, a mixture makes a minus. So what is this saying? It's saying I'm starting at 5 and I'm taking away 3. So if I start at 5 and I take away 3, I go left. So that's going to take me down to 2. So the answer to this would be 2. Example 4, 2 negatives. We've got 4 minus -4. 2 negatives make a positive, and that's something that you need to remember. 2 negatives make a positive. So this essentially means a plus. Okay? So 4 minus -4 means 4 plus 4. So 4 plus 4 is 8. Okay. Example 5. -6 plus -4. What does that mean? Well, the first thing, we've got a plus and a minus. We've got a mixture. A mixture makes a minus. So this would be minus. So what? And this is where the visualizing a number line and thinking about where am I starting and where am I going will come in handy. So the first thing we should do is realize that this mixture is a minus. So this essentially says I'm starting at -6 and I'm taking away 4. So if I'm starting at -6 and I'm taking away 4, I'm going to go left. Where would that get me? It's going to get me in 6. Where am I going? I'm going left because I'm negative by 4, which would get me down to -10. Example 6. The temperature in Bristol is 3 degrees lower than at Exeter, where it's 1 degree. So in Exeter, it is 1 degrees. What is the temperature in Exeter? Okay. The temperature in Bristol is 3 degrees lower than in Exeter, where it is 1 degree. So in Exeter, it is 1 degrees, and it is 3 degrees lower. So that means we need to do 1 degrees minus 3 degrees. So I'm starting at 1, and I'm taking away 3. So that would get me, if I think of a number line, and again, this is a good technique. You can draw a number line. Obviously, hopefully we're quite confident with that. But if I think about a number line, if I'm at 1 and I take away 3, it means I'd be going left. If I go left by 3, it would take me all the way down to negative 2. So this would be negative 2 degrees. Okay. So the recap there. The best thing that you can do is visualize a number line, know that a mixture makes a minus, and two negatives make a positive, and then ask yourself these two questions. Where am I starting and where am I going? And you can use this as your guide. The next element of negative numbers that will make you confident and successful with them is BIDMAS. Okay, and I've written it here for you. Again, another good thing you could put on a revision card. Brackets, indices, divide, multiply, add and subtract. What does that mean? Well, that means the order in which we do things. That is the order in which we do operations. So we'd have to do a bracket first if we saw a bracket, then next in line. So the next person that is, or the next element that is most important would be indices, which is a power. So this little power here, like 2 squared, that would be an indice. Divide, obviously, times, add and subtract. So we're going to take the BIDMAS element into an example in the next page, which will take us on to how do we multiply and divide negative numbers. So we've just looked at adding and subtracting, where we would like to make sure we visualize the number line and ask ourselves, where are we starting and where are we going? Now we need to know, how do we multiply and divide negative numbers? Well, again, I've got some remember me cards for you on the right, where I've written a mix makes a minus. If you can remember that rhyme, negative numbers multiplying and dividing will become a lot clearer for you. A mix makes a minus. So what does that mean? If I've got a negative number multiplied by a positive number, that will always give me a negative, because this is a mix. It's a mix of signs. You've got one negative and one positive. If you have a mix of signs, a mix makes a minus. So negative times by a positive is a negative. And exactly the same vice versa. If you have a positive multiplied by a negative, you are always going to get a negative. Mix makes a minus. If you can remember that, multiplying and dividing these negative numbers will be so much clearer. And as I've written here, these rules are the same for divide. So we can replace this sign here with a divide, and it is the same rule. Okay. The next remember me is, if they are the same, it's a plus. And that one doesn't rhyme. But if you can remember, two signs of the same minus or of the same plus will always give you a positive. Okay. A negative times by a negative is a positive. A positive times by a positive is a positive, and that's quite obvious. It's almost as if we don't need that one there, but worth having just in case. Okay, so let's see how we can take these and potentially the BIDMAS stuff into some examples. So example 7, we need to do 4 multiplied by 15. The technique that I use here is I ignore the signs, I do what I have to do to the numbers, in this case multiply them, and then I think about, is this going to be a positive or a negative answer? So let's just ignore the signs. We've got 4 multiplied by 15. Well, 4 multiplied by 15 would give me 30, because 60. 15, 30, 45, 60. So the answer is 60. Now I need to look at the signs. Well, I had a 4, positive 4, and a negative 15. What do we know? A mix is a minus. So this will be minus 60. And it's as easy as that. Ignore the signs, multiply them, look at the signs. Is it going to be a positive or is it going to be a negative? So example 8. We have got minus 7 times by minus 3. So ignore the signs. We've got 7 times by 3, which is 21. Now look at our signs. We've got a negative multiplied by a negative. This is the same. And what do we know? A same will give us a plus. So the answer is just plus 21. So I don't need to put a negative in because two negatives make a positive. Example 9. So here we have got minus 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by minus 4. Now, if you have more than one thing being multiplied together, you can just do them from left to right. You can do them in any order. It makes no difference because we say that multiplication is commutative, which means 2 times 3 is 6 and 3 times 2 is also 6. So whichever way you do them, you'll get the same answer. How do you tackle 3? Well, you're going to just stick with the first two first. So you're going to take the first two and you're going to multiply them. What would that give us? Well, using the same technique, ignore the sign. 3 times 2 is 6. We've got a negative and we've got a positive. So a mix makes a minus, so that will be minus 6. Now we can put our sign back in for the next bit. Minus 4 is what we need to times that by. And now we can do that. Well, again, we now need to ignore the signs. 6 multiplied by 4 is 24. And what signs do we have? We have a minus and a minus. Well, what do we know? We know that things that are the same, a minus times a minus will always give me a plus. So the answer to this whole question is just plus 24. So I've broken down that question into 2 elements, and I've used the same technique. I've multiplied what I need to together, ignored the sign, put the sign back in. And if you can do that carefully, negative numbers will be so easy for you. Just remember, a mix makes a minus, and the same is a plus. Example 10. We've got minus 5 in a bracket squared. The first question to ask yourself is, what does squared mean? Well, squared means... What do? We ignore the signs. 5 times 5 is 25. Now we think about the signs. We've got a minus times by a minus. Well, we know, don't we, that the same, a minus times by a minus, is a plus. So the answer to this is just plus 25. The next one, minus 3 squared. Well, squared means times by itself. So we're going to do minus 3 times by minus 3. Well, ignore the signs. 3 times 3 is 9. Think about the signs. What did we do? We did a minus times by a minus. That's the same. So it's going to be plus 9. Example 12. Dividing. Well, in our Remember Me, just here, we've said that these rules work exactly the same for divide. So we just divide, think about the signs and use the rules. Just like we've done with multiplying. We have got 21 divided by minus 7. Well, let's ignore the signs. 21 divided by 7. How many 7s go into 21? 3. Think about the signs. What did we have? We had a positive divided by a negative. Well, that is a mix. And what do we know? A mix makes a minus. So this answer will be minus 3. So again, 4 divided by minus 11. Ignore the signs. 44 divided by 11 would give me 4. Think about the signs. We've got a minus divided by a minus. Well, that's the same, so that means our answer will be a plus. So it is just 4, positive 4. Example 14. minus 34 divided by 5. So here, if we ignore the signs, we've got 34 divided by 5. Now, you might be thinking, 5 does not go into 34. It goes into 35, but not 34. Well, what I want you to get really confident with is we can leave that as a fraction. We could say that this equals 34 over 5. Because what does over 5 mean? Remember, a fraction means divide. So instead of trying to bus stop this and work it out, we could just leave it as a fraction. Sometimes you might actually need to bus stop because you need your answer to be a decimal. But in this case, we don't need our answer to be a decimal. It doesn't say give your answer as a decimal. And a fraction and a decimal, remember, are the same thing. A half is exactly the same as 0.5. It's just a different way to say it or write it down. Okay. So 34 over 5 is a lot easier than doing a bus stop and trying to work out how many 5s are going to 34, making a decimal. Be confident that we can leave it as a fraction. Is this fraction going to be positive or negative? Well, that's the real question. Minus divided by a plus. A mix makes a minus, mix makes minus, so that would be minus. So the answer to that, we could say that is minus 34 over 5. If you really wanted to and you would like a decimal, you could put 5 into 34 and do it that way, and you'd end up with a minus decimal answer. But be confident that fractions are not scary, they are your friend. They make things a lot more straightforward and less work, so be confident in leaving answers as fractions if they are going to be a fraction. And finally, example 15. We have got a lot going on here, and this is where BIDMAS is going to come into play. Okay. BIDMAS. What does BIDMAS tell us? BIDMAS tells us brackets, indices, divide, multiply, add and subtract. Okay, we have to do things in that order if we have those elements. So what do we have in example 15? We have minus 4 plus 2 lots of minus 3 squared. Well, what would be the first thing that we've got here? We've got brackets, we have got brackets, and we've got indices. And the brackets and indices are an element together. So we're going to do that. The mistake here, this means 2 times. This means 2 lots of minus 3 squared. We do not do 2 times minus 3 and then square it. That is the mistake that a lot of students make. So many, actually. Probably the most common mistake you'd see in this question here is they would do 2 times minus 3 and then they would square it. But we need to square the minus 3 first. So the first thing we need to do here is square this. And we know, don't we, that minus 3 squared would be minus 3 times minus 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Think about the signs. We've got a minus times a minus, which gives us a plus, the same as a plus. So this is 9. So I can rewrite out my question. We've got minus 4. Maybe I'll do it in black so you can see the bit I've changed. Times by our new 9. Okay. This 9 has come from us working out the brackets and indices first. Now what does BIDMAS tell us to do? Do we have any brackets? No. Do we have any indices? No. Do we have any division? No. Do we have any multiplication? Yes. We have got some multiplication just here. Okay. And what does that tell us? That tells us we need to do 2 times 9. Well, first part of this lesson, if you are at minus 4 and you add 18, which way do you go? If I'm at minus 4 on a number line and I go to the right, 18, it's going to take me into the positives. How many into the positives? Well, a good little trick here is to get me to 0 is 4. So if I take 4 away from 18, I've got 14 left over. So it's going to take me 14 into the positive. So the final answer to that is 14. Yeah, and that will conclude today's lesson. Quite a short one, but there's some really key elements to negative numbers that will make other questions and other topics a lot easier. The takeaways, remember, and I've said it a lot today, a mix makes a minus and the same as a plus. That works for multiplying and dividing. When you are adding and subtracting, visualize a number line or draw one. Ask yourself these questions: where am I starting and where am I going? Where am I starting will be decided on the first number you've got, and where I'm going will decide whether you are adding or subtracting, okay? And then also, using those same rhymes and statements from multiplying and dividing, if you've got a plus and a minus next to each other, that means that it's a minus. A mixture makes a minus. And if you've got two negatives together, it means it's going to turn it into a plus. And that would decide where I'm going, left or right. Okay? So, in the description, there are a shed load of questions that you can practice. There's, I don't know, about 100, I think. And there's also answers there as well. So, go to the description, open up the worksheet, have a go at a load of different random ones. You don't have to do them all, just pick some ones that look hard, see if you got it right using these methods, and I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully you learned something. I will see you in the equations of a straight line coming up tomorrow. Thank you for joining in.